Hi everybody, welcome back to HighByte. I'm Tom, and this is Zero to Pipeline. Now, in our previous videos, we installed Intelligence Hub, we got in, we took a look through the UI, and then we started making some connections to data sources. We wrote out to MQTT and SQLite, but today we're going to make our first pipeline and we're going to write some data to MQTT that we can use as a case study for any of our subsequent experiences. All right, so here I am at my Intelligence Hub login. I'm going to go ahead and log in with my free trial going. And I've got my internal MQTT connection already made from last time. So I'm going to go ahead into that guy, and I'm going to make 3 outputs because we are going to create data for 3 different pumps that we're going to reference for our future use case. And we're going to iterate on that as we go when we're making our pipeline. But I'm going to start here by making a new output. And you'll remember this isn't too complicated. We're just going to give it a name, we'll call it pump 1, and give it a topic. And we'll put them under the pump's parent, and then we'll call it pump 1. So that should be pretty easy. Create. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this again. New output, pump 2, pumps / pump 2. Great. And then I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to say for this pump 2 that I'm looking at, copy this, and we're going to copy it to pump 3 instead. So copy, and you see now I'm on pump 3, and I got to make one adjustment here. Pump 3, save. All right. So if I go back to my connection overview, well, there's the overview. There's my list of outputs. You can see I get pump 1, pump 2, pump 3. All of them are stored under pumps, pump 1, pump 2, pump 3. Great. All right, so now let's go make a pipeline for these guys. We're going to feed data out to these connections. So I'm going to go over here to pipelines. We don't have any pipelines yet. I'm going to make a new pipeline, and I'm going to call it create pump data. There we go. I'll give it a little description. Creating data and going to MQTT topics for experimentation. Great. That'll work for now. And now I've got my empty pipeline. Now, we looked a little bit at this in the overview, but every pipeline starts with this start block. And this is where all the messages are going to originate. This is where everything is going to get kicked off and sent down the pipeline. We do need to add something to kick off this pipeline, to start it processing. And that can be found in our stages, in our triggers. These are all the options that can start a message down this line. There are a couple other ways we can start a message, but these are the ones I want to focus on now. I'm going to grab a pulled trigger. I'm just going to click and drag it into the space. It's going to automatically connect itself. This will let us just send a message or kick off an event every 1 second, every 3 seconds, every 3 minutes. I can configure this interval to be pretty much whatever I want. I find every 3 seconds is a pretty good working pace. So I'm not going to enable it just yet. We'll come back and do that, but I don't want it creating messages while I'm building the pipeline. So we're going to save that there. And you can see I've still got this error because we're not doing anything yet. That's not a problem at this moment. First thing we're going to do, let's go ahead and grab us back into our stages. The rest of our stages, here we've got some common stages, some control stages, parse, format, IO. These are how we're going to manipulate our events as they move down this pipeline. So some of the common ones that we use a lot, transform just lets us write JavaScript. Models let us associate information from our pipeline into a model that we define. We'll talk about models later on. We can break up arrays or objects into smaller amounts or smaller messages. We can aggregate using these buffer stages, smaller events back into larger ones. So I'm just going to grab the transform for now. Grab one of these guys, pull them down here. Let's take a look at some more options here. So in the control, we can make switches that'll let us do conditional functions, so we can like have our pipeline branch go this way if this case, this way if the other case. Let's see, we can send things to sub-pipelines. Let's go into parse. We can interpret these data formats and then format them back out to these formats. And on I/O we can read or write or smart query. We're going to talk about smart query specifically later, but we'll talk about read and write in just a moment here. So let me make this transform. Let's call this pump1. This is where we're going to make the data for pump1. And I'm going to expand this a little bit. We're going to write out a stage.setValue is going to set the event value coming out of this stage. Now, for those of you familiar with JavaScript, you'll recognize this little dot function here. This is to say that this piece of information is a child of this piece of information. So we've got this single large object event that moves along the pipeline. And then value is usually where we're storing or using important information. And then usually we'll store information as sub-information within value. So this all happens as a JavaScript object, and that looks like something in these curly braces. If we take these curly braces, JavaScript objects have keys and they have values. So the keys are usually strings. So we'll do a pump name, main, nope, name, there we go. And then we get a colon, and then the value of this can be any data type, including another object. So we could have another object in here and cascade that down hierarchically. In our case, we're not going to do that. We're just going to call it pump1. Pump1. Add a comma, then we can add the next value. We'll call this one flow rate. And this will be, let's see, we'll do a little math.random here. This will just generate us a random number between 0 and 1 times 4, and we'll just add 10 to it. So we'll get a number between 0 and between 10 and 14. No problem. We'll call this flow unit. If it's got a flow rate, we got to know what the units are for that. We'll call it gallons per minute. And then let's do one more pair of this. Let's do a power draw, and this can be let's see, math.random between 30 and 33. Power unit. And this one can be watts. Not a very strong pump, but that's okay. All right, so we've got some information defining a pump here. That's great. We're going to close that, and we're going to save this. And then I can actually copy and paste this out 2 more times just by hitting this little duplicate icon here. So we got pump 1, 1. Now we're going to change that. Pump 2. One more time. Pump 2, 1. Now we're going to change that. 3. Pump 3. All right. Pump 1, 2, and 3. And then we can wire these guys up. And we'll save that. All right. So when we run an event down this pipeline, starting from the trigger, we're going to trigger each one of these guys, and they're each going to make their own message that looks like this. I'm going to goof on these a little bit because I want them to be a little bit noticeably different from one another. I'm going to mess with their formats a little bit. Let's see. Oh, I got to change the names of the pumps too. Flow unit. Maybe, yeah, that one's fine. Pump 2 here. We won't change those numbers because we changed them before. Maybe this pump is particularly inefficient. It takes a lot of extra power. Capitalize that. Maybe capitalize this, or actually just call it power unit, right? So you can imagine that if you've got pumps in a bunch of different places, maybe they weren't all configured at the same time. Maybe they all had slightly different configurations, and we are going to want to address that in the future. So we're going to emulate just some slight data inconsistencies, data format inconsistencies here. Maybe this one is pump 3, but we typoed it, right? So this one is name. We saw a lot of typos going on there. Maybe this one's a particularly efficient pump. All right. Great. So let's save that. So we've got a message coming down, kicks off each one of these messages, and then we're going to want to write them out to their MQTT topics. So I'm going to go into my stages again. I'm going to grab 3 write stages. There we go. I'm going to change this to write 1. Oh, it's not going to like that, actually. Here, let's do it this way. Write 3, write 2, write 1. All right, and these all have errors because we need to tell them what to write to. Now, we configured 3 outputs. So I'm going to go to my first write. I'm going to say over here in my references pane, I want an output. I want an output from my internal MQTT connection. Here are my 3 outputs that I connected. All I got to do right now is drag this guy in here, and we're off to the races. I'm going to go to write number 2, drag pump 2 in here. You can see we've got that connection details that we set up there, and we'll do pump 3. Perfect. Let's wire these guys up. Save that. Now we should be right. Well, not just yet. Don't forget, come back here, turn on your trigger, and save. You can see once I'm going, every 3 seconds, I have this little counter. This counter is going to show us how many messages have been processed through. So we have this little counter increasing every 3 seconds, and you can see the status of all my stages. They're all functioning great, and each one of them is getting a message for every one that this sends. I can also click here on my, well, if I click on every one of these stages, I can see some statistics here on how many times this is run since my last save, some information about how long it's taken, anything like that. And if I look here at this block, I get those statistics for my entire pipeline. Pretty neat. All right, so let's see if this is working. Let's open up our UNS client, another tab, and this is, we're going to log in again. This is going to look at the MQTT server we already have installed. There we go. We just wrote. So there's my pumps, and then here's pump 1, pump 2, pump 3. You see they're all a little different, and they are updating in real time. That's great. These are working. Love that. All right, I'm going to do one more thing that's going to make things a little interesting. I'm going to come up here just to my top branch, and I'm going to add another transform. And I'm going to say here, okay, I want my next message. You'll notice these write stages are not the end of our pipeline. A lot of times they are, but we can keep working after. So we can write something and then continue to work with the message that we were working on. The same message is just going to carry through a write stage. We see here that I'm going to work on pump 1. Maybe I want to get the flow rate out of this. So I'm actually going to go ahead, I'm going to say I want to pull only the flow rate. I'm going to take my stage, and what we see here is an event.value. So I'm going to get event.value.flowRate, and that's going to pass on this number. So if I set the output of this stage to set the output of this stage to event.value.flowRate. Did I spell that right? Flowrate. Flowrate. Ooh, I need a capital F. Flowrate. Now, I should be getting this number out the other side, right? So let's just call that, let's call this stage flow rate. I could call it whatever I want, but I think this is going to make it easier. And I'm going to save that, wire it up, and I'm going to do this probably just once more. I'll do it with power draw as well. So here we're going to call this one power draw. See if I'm doing that right. Power draw. Yep, lowercase d. I'm going to copy that. Instead of flow rate for this one, I'm going to get the power draw. Cool. All right, so now these messages should be giving me the flow rate and the power draw specifically. That's neat. But I have to actually write them out. Ooh, and I didn't configure outputs for them. Now, I could go back to my connections, log in there, into my MQTT, my outputs, and configure another 2 outputs for this. But I could also use this other stage. I'm going to use go back to my stages, to my IO, and grab a write new stage for each one of these. Write new, write new. So let's do write new flow, write new power. Okay. What am I doing here? What is the difference between a write new and a write? Now a write will write to a configured output. A write new lets us configure an output on the fly. You'll see here I'm going to go ahead and say which connection do I want to use for my flow. I'm going to use my MQTT again, and it's going to ask me what topic do I want to use. I'm going to call this pumps slash pump1 slash flow rate. There we go. And if you look at this, you'll see a lot of the same configuration options that we have on our output. So we can do pretty much all of our output configuration in a write new. Why might you want one or the other? If you're going to reuse this output a lot, you probably want to go ahead and configure the output so that other people can use it, so that you can use it again. It's really easy to reference. But if you're just doing it one time and you're never really going to need to interact with it too much, a write new stage might work really well for you. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to do the same thing for power. Let's see. MQTT, pumps, pump1, power draw. There we go. Save. And I'll connect these guys. So now, do one more save. Hopefully everything's working. Yep, my numbers, stages all look good. My numbers are increasing. Love that. Let's go check out our UNS client. Now you can see, in addition to having the entire pump information displayed the way that we like, we also can display children of it, and those are just the values. So this is kind of cool. If you didn't know this about MQTT, you can store entire objects or just primitive data types. And so now we have specific outputs for our two pump1 values. I'm not going to set those up for the other two, but we're going to use them a little bit later. So yeah, we have now configured a pipeline. We have kicked off our events on a regular basis, created, or in reality, you're probably going to read data more often than you're creating it, but you might do this. You're going to create some data, and we're going to write it out to some data source. Now, what you've probably found is that this is a pretty manual process that we just went through. We configured individual outputs. We dealt with each one of these pieces individually. And some of them were a little goofy. When we start moving forward, we're going to start looking at the models as a way to standardize all of our data. And we're going to do a little bit of programmatic work with our connections and with our data in order to reference, if you had 100 pumps or 1,000 pumps, as you very likely do, we're going to set it up in ways that are going to handle that programmatically. So you don't actually have to click that stage 1,000 times, because that would be difficult. But for our case, we're going to just use these 3 pumps as our scalable systems. So hopefully this was interesting to you, and I'm excited to move on to the next pieces. So I hope you guys enjoyed making your first pipeline. I hope this was informative for you. I'd really love for you to get in here, do some experimentation of your own, see what you can fool around with and what you can learn from it. If you have any questions on how any of these stages work, or you find yourself looking at anything that you don't understand, I really encourage you to check out the user guide. If you have anything beyond that, take a look at the knowledge base, see if we can get anything logged for you there. If you have any further questions, definitely feel free to reach out. Looking forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Happy pipelining.